I need you to imagine the Caribbean in the late 1600s, not as the paradise postcards paint it, but as a powder keg floating on salt water. Every harbour bristled with cannons, every ship carried more muskets than cargo, and every sailor swore allegiance to a crown or swore vengeance against one. But there was a night, a single night, when a handful of ragged buccaneers struck a blow so audacious it cracked the armour of an empire and sent shockwaves across oceans. I shouldn't know this much. The official histories dress it up as commerce raiding or dismiss it as a footnote. But in the tattered logs of a French privateer logs, never meant for polite eyes, the story bleeds through. It begins in whispers, a council in the shadows of Tortuga, where rum and gunpowder thickened the air more than smoke. Men who had nothing in common, French deserters, English mutineers, runaway slaves, even a few women disguised in salt-stained coats, agreed to something suicidal. They would attack a city the empire considered untouchable. The Spanish crown had made the Caribbean its jewel, its fortress, its altar of gold and blood. Cartagena, Havana, Portobello. They were not ports, they were symbols. To strike one was to spit in the face of kings. But to the Buccaneers, hungry and hunted, symbols were meat. Picture it, a fleet of patched-up sloops and captured frigates. Sails stitched from stolen linen, their decks groaning with men who'd sold their souls to chance. They rode in silence under a moon smothered by clouds, approaching walls bristling with cannons that could have ripped them to shreds in minutes. And yet, those cannons stayed silent. Why? Because someone inside someone with keys and knowledge had turned traitor. That's the forbidden part, the part the empire buried. Someone within the walls of a Spanish stronghold wanted the Buccaneers to succeed, and succeed they did. The city that fell that night was left smoking, its coffers emptied, its governor humiliated, Spain's invincibility shattered like glass under a cutlass blow. From that moment, the balance of Caribbean power shifted. England, France, and the Netherlands all scented weakness. The age of Buccaneers wasn't just about greed, it was about rewriting the map of the new world. But here's the part that keeps me awake. The traitor's name was never written down, never confessed, never hanged. Some say he or she sailed away with the Buccaneers, living out their days under a false flag. Others whisper that the traitor became something worse, a spy feeding to worlds, living in shadows long after the raid. The truth is buried in gunpowder and flame. And if you follow me into Chapter 1, I'll take you aboard the lead ship that night, where the smell of salt and fear tangled in the rigging, and the first cannon was about to fire. Tortuga smelled of rum and blood that night. The tavern shutters rattled in the trade wind, but inside the smoke was thicker than the sky outside. Every table was a battlefield, cards slapping, knives flashing, rum spilling like blood. And in the farthest corner, behind a curtain of shadow and suspicion, sat the council that would change the Caribbean forever. There were 10 of them, 10 wolves dressed as men. At the head of the table sat Jean Ducasse, a French privateer with eyes like broken glass and a smile that never reached them. Beside him, 2 Englishmen, Captain Sharp and John Morris, their coats stiff with salt and their boots muddy from weeks ashore. There was Diego the Moor, whose cutlass had been taken from a Spanish officer still warm with life, and Mary Killigrew, her hair tucked under a tricorn, passing for another nameless sailor until she opened her mouth and the room leaned in to listen. The argument had been raging for hours. Port. Royal is too close to the English crown, Sharp growled. We'd have their ships on our throats before dawn. Cartagena, then, suggested Morris, eyes glinting. The richest port Spain owns. Diego slammed his fist down, rattling cups. And the best defended. You'd sooner attack the devil in his own chapel. Mary leaned back, her smile slow, her voice cutting through the smoke. Not if the devil leaves his door unlocked. The room went still. Jean Ducasse leaned forward. Explain. Mary's eyes gleamed. I have word, quiet word, that Cartagena's walls are watched by fewer men than they claim. A sickness. Half their garrison lies in hammocks, coughing blood, and the governor's pride blinds him to his weakness. The council stirred, each weighing risk and reward. Tortuga's tavern creaked as though it knew the weight of their decision. Jean Ducasse spoke last. Then it is decided. We gather every ship, every rogue, every cannon. We strike Cartagena. There was silence, then the scrape of steel on wood as each captain drew their blade. 10 cutlasses crossed above the table, their steel catching the lamplight like lightning in miniature. By the articles they swore together, share and share alike, victory or death. The room erupted with cheers and curses, mugs slamming, fists pounding. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and salt. Somewhere in the darkness, a spy might have been listening. But inside the tavern, the decision had already been carved into history. Later that night, Jean Ducasse stood on the shore, gazing at the silhouettes of their ships anchored in the bay. The moon was veiled, the stars dim. Behind him, Mary appeared, her tricorn tilted low. You trust them? She asked quietly. I trust their greed, Ducasse replied. It will keep them sharp. And if your sickness in Cartagena is a lie. She smiled, slow and dangerous. Then history will remember us as fools. But if it is true, history will never forget us. The surf hissed against the sand, as if in applause or warning. Above, storm clouds rolled like cannons preparing to fire, and far across the sea, Cartagena slept, unaware that 10 wolves had just bared their teeth. The fleet slid out of Tortuga like knives drawn under a tablecloth, no fanfare. No songs, not even the usual drunken curses flung from the jetty. Orders were passed mouth to ear. Gestures took the place of drums, and every man aboard kept one eye on the sails, and one on the black seam of horizon where the world ended. Our lead sloop, Sainte Marie, rode the dark like a catlight, quick, untrustworthy. Lanterns were hooded, the masts stripped of anything that might chatter. Even the ocean seemed in on the conspiracy, smoothing itself into a sheen of ink that took each keel and carried it softly, as a thief carries a purse. I'd been handed a place on Ducasse's quarterdeck, not because I deserved it, but because I wrote everything down. Men like him loved witnesses when the story promised to end in glory, and scapegoats when it didn't. Beside him, Mary stood with her hat pulled low, eyes never still, counting the stars as if reading a catechism only she remembered. North by just a hair, she murmured, and the helmsman shaved the compass so fine you could have cut your finger on the course at midnight. The clouds knit tight and the sky went blind. No stars to steer by now, only the wind's breath in the rigging and the whisper of wake. The little fleet followed in our shadow, the Vengeance, the brave Charlotte, the Englishman's Prosper, and a mongrel of other hulls stitched with hope and bad decisions. They were drawn by the scent of a wound, a city's sickness, a garrison halved. A governor too proud to admit he'd left his back gate open to the night. Signal won't flare, Ducasse said. glancing at the black lamps hung inboard. No light, no sound, no God. God's here, Mary said, without looking at him. He's just not picking sides. Then we will, Ducasse replied. And the wind pressed into the canvas as if it approved, down on the main deck. The crew had quieted into that tense peace that comes before storms and murders. Men checked their flints, kissed medallions, spat, laughed too hard, then went silent again. I watched Diego the Moor run a whetstone down his cutlass until the steel hummed like a tuning fork. He caught me staring, grinned without warmth, and held the blade to my throat close enough to taste iron in the air, far enough to be a joke. "Write something brave about me," he said, and the blade flashed away, even if it's a lie. Past the bowsprit, the Caribbean peeled back in slow ribbons. Flying fish burst from the dark like silver knives and were gone. Somewhere aft a man was quietly sick. Someone else prayed in a French that had learned too much Spanish. The articles had been read before we sailed equal shares, equal votes, wounded paid before the whole. No games of chance on duty, no striking a fellow without offering him a fair duel on shore. Men had signed with names or marks or bones knotted to string. Paper made a nation out of thieves. Ink made brothers out of enemies. Or so we told ourselves, because without stories we were only desperate men with guns. Just before dawn, the clouds unstitched. A few shy stars blinked awake as if remembering themselves. Mary's head lifted. "Hear that?" I held my breath. At first there was nothing, then a tremor underfoot, a bass too low for ears. The helmsman frowned. Groundswell, but it wasn't. It grew steadier, resolving into a rhythm that belonged on land, not sea wheels, axles, a chain dragged across stone. Mary moved to the larboard rail and stared into the dark until dark stared back. "Sound carries strange out here," Ducasse said, but he didn't sound sure. We hove to, sails shivering. The fleet mimicked us, shadow after shadow easing. Silence fell so absolute you could hear the ocean considering us. Then the wind shifted and brought the sound clear, a port waking, a gate ratcheting up, a chain rattling on a drum. That was no miracle, no ghost. That was mechanics and men. Cartagena, Mary whispered, and the way she said it made the name a secret and a dare. We put the wind abaft and came on slow. The moon dragged itself from a torn shawl of cloud and found us black holes. Patched sails, the workaday miracle of rope and will. Ahead, the coast lifted out of the water, a crescent of land bristling with palms and guns. A city crouched behind walls, a harbour mouth with its teeth bared. The great boom chain that barred the entrance lay slack on the water, floating like a dead serpent. The fortress lamps burned low and stingy, as if ashamed. "How many?" Ducasse asked Mary. "Enough to hang us," she said. "Not enough to stop us if the chain stays down, and will it?" She didn't answer. A gull cried once overhead, and the sound made me think of a knife when it finds the seam in a rib cage. Diego came up from below with a brace of pistols and an expression like a dare. "Men say there's a ghost in the water, Captain." "What kind?" Ducasse said, half amused. "The kind that lifts chains and takes wages." Mary turned then. "Only kind that does any good." She had arranged everything. We later told ourselves, because it's easier to believe in one traitor than in a web of need. But the truth is, no man lifts a chain that big alone. Somewhere inside those walls, sick men had turned their faces to the sea and decided to let it in. The Empire calls that treason. The hungry call it bargaining. History pretends it can tell the difference. We went in on the tide to port, the bastions hunched like old soldiers. To starboard, the reef hissed under its breath. Our masts hardly whispered. The men breathed like conspirators. The chain brushed our hull with a lover's touch. For a heartbeat, I thought it would rise from the depths and coil around us, breaking bone and oak alike. Then we were past. Then the Vengeance. Then the Prosper and brave Charlotte, each taking the gate as if stealing a kiss no one would believe in. The morning, a lantern winked twice, low on the city's seawall. A pulse so small it might have been a mistake. Mary answered with nothing. Ducas's jaw tightened. He trusted signs the way a gambler trusts the next card. He couldn't help it. Men like him build their lives out of coincidences and call it providence. We skirted the anchored. Hulks asleep in the outer roadstead. They sat heavy with sugar and silver and arrogance, a forest of masts against the pallor of pre-dawn. No watch sang out. If there had been sentries, their eyes were turned inward, toward hammocks and coughs and fever dreams. The smell of the place reached us, the sweet rot of molasses. Tar, awful, the coppery temps that means cannons have been cleaned and loaded. It smelled like money and methods. Boarding parties, Ducas said. And the orders uncoiled through the ship like rope thrown blind and caught perfectly. Grapnels coiled, knives loosened, faces wrapped in cloth part to keep the smoke from making your lungs into wet rags. Part so no man could swear under oath he'd seen your face. Mary leaned close to me without looking. If you want to live to write it, stay in my shadow and don't be a hero. Heroes make good epitaphs and bad witnesses. The first target was a stout galleon riding easy near the mole. Lanterns guttering under the bulk of her. Diego took the bows with a half-dozen climbers. Our prow kissed her flank, a soft thud that might as well have been a drumbeat. Hooks flew. Lines bit. The shock up the rigging told me the ship had accepted us, which is how I thought of it then, as if ships had choices. Maybe they do. Men swarmed up the ratlins, shadows skipping from shadow to shadow. A dog barked once from the quarter, then went quiet forever. A sentry coughed, too surprised to shout, and Diego's hand covered his mouth like a benediction. Gunfire on a sleeping deck has a particular sound. The first shot always seems small. Unbelieving, then the second makes up for it. Then the third is everyone catching up to the fact of things. Our men moved as if they'd been born to this geometry. 2 to silence the helm, 3 to pin the gun crews, 1 wicked soul to run along the gun ports and shove tampions in, spiking their tongues. I followed my orders, which were Mary's orders, which were don't think, see everything. By the time Ducas stepped onto the galleon's waist, she was ours. The crew that hadn't died quick were on their knees with hands up. The officer of the watch was bleeding politely on his own deck, and the night was coming apart like old rope. From the mole, a bell tried to find its courage and failed. In the fort, a sputter of flame ran along a fuse, then died with a hiss. Even the city's gods seemed feverish. Take her guns, Ducas ordered, and turn them inward. That was the unholy brilliance of men like him. Take the Empire's teeth and make them bite the Empire's tongue. We swung the galleon gently until her broadsides faced the quay. Powder monkeys, sponges hissed, rammers thumped. Flamers crouched, linstocks smouldering. The cannons looked patient, the way crocodiles do in stories told to terrify children into obedience. Mary was already gone, ghosting down a line to the mole with 20 men. I saw her drop, roll, rise, and disappear into the lacework of alleys beyond the customs house. Later, men would say she had a key and a lover and a map and a saint. The truth was, she understood the appetite of cities. She could find their throats in the dark, at the fort on the spit. A figure ran along the parapet, waving a torch and courage he couldn't afford. He reached the signal mortar that would wake the whole town and put flame to its mouth. The fuse took, flared, and in that tiny sunrise all our future was written. The city would wake and bay like a pack of dogs, or we would keep it dreaming long enough to knife its dreams. Diego lifted a pistol and the world slowed to the size of the space between his eye and the man with the torch. The shot cracked. The torch flew. The mortar coughed smoke and shame and nothing more. The man folded into the crenels with the dignity all dead share. The gate slammed behind us with a sound like a verdict, and the harbor's breath turned into open, ocean roar, cold, unjudging. The Sainte Marie leaped forward, canvas bellied wide, lines singing. Behind us, the city of Cartagena burned in a jagged necklace of fires, and in that orange glow I could still see the lantern that had saved us, a single eye winking once, as if to say, "Run now." Talks later. Then darkness swallowed it, and the sea took our attention back the way a wolf demands it. "Count them," Ducasse ordered, and I scrambled to the taffrail, peering into the slate-black chop. Our brood poured through the last spit of surf-like pups from a den vengeance, wounded but game. Prosper, missing a mast but grinning. Brave Charlotte dragging smoke like a bride's veil. 3 smaller sloops I hadn't learned to love yet, and 2 prizes already wallowing heavy with silver. 7, 8, 9. My breath caught. "We're short one," I called. "Who?" Mary didn't look. She listened. She always listened. Spanish galleon we turned. I shouted back. "She's not coming." "She gave it up for us," Diego said grimly, thumbing fresh powder into his pistols. "That buys her a place in whatever heaven takes liars." Ahead, the horizon was not empty. Sails shouldered it like storm clouds that had learned to think. A line of ships held the dark the way a scythe holds wheat, clean, inevitable. Tierra Armada de Barlovento. The windward guard had heard Cartagena's whisper, or smelled it on the air. The reek of powder, the perfume of silver torn from its bed. 3 frigates in the van, a tall galleon, and flanking them 2 low, vicious-looking patishes that moved like hunting dogs with the leash off. They were waiting, Ducasse said softly, and the softness made it worse. Mary's head tilted, the way a musician leans to find the key in a noisy room. "Wind skewing," she said. "Norist wants to make a liar of us. We make our own truth," Ducasse snapped. "Weather the line, put the prizes in the lee. We punch past them before daylight turns their aim into mathematics." Lanterns, hooded, orders hissed. Our fleet slewed to starboard, wet decks slapping under our boots. The prizes fat, slow, guilty huddled inside our crescent. Men cursed in 3 languages and meant the same prayers. A wave climbed our bow and tried to pull us back to confession. The hull shrugged and shouldered it aside. The first Spanish shot came as a polite inquiry, a ball that skipped twice and died of boredom. The second was a statement, a splash beside Prosper that slapped her men flat with spray. The third carried a whistle like a sewing needle and took our mizzen pennant into the night, where it became a star no navigator could trust. "Hold your fire," Ducasse murmured to the gunners. Palm low, like calming a dog. Make them count their breaths. The frigates adjusted with eerie grace, their white crosses ghost pale. Their commanders knew this water, like priests no sin. They cut for our beam and waited for us to choose bad geometry. Shoals to larboard, Mary said, voice a blade. Reef like the devil's teeth. How close can we bite without bleeding? Ducasse asked. As close as you dare, she said. And her smile that no one saw was all flint. We edged toward the reef. That long, whispering fist of coral laid down by old storms with a sense of humor. The Spaniards hesitated. They'd seen too many good keels made into splinters on that white grin. Our men grinned back, in that foolish way men do when they're terrified and in love with it. A light winked ahead low. Quick, wrong, once, twice, pause, once. It was not the seawall code, but it rhymed with it. Mary's head came up. There, she breathed. I squinted and found it. A small felucca, riding like a bottle cork in the swell. Mast trimmed to nothing, hull dark as sin. The lantern on her bow wagged a new pattern, then died as if ashamed to be seen. Friendly, Ducasse said. Familiar, Mary answered, and the word had salt and blood in it. What's the verse? Diego asked. Mary chewed it, spat it out. Channel inside the teeth. A run between K's the charts don't confess. If we take it, we shave the frigates, and they eat coral for breakfast, trying to match. If we miss, she didn't finish. None of us needed the picture. Ducasse's eyes were coins in a gambler's fist. How confident. I trust the hand that holds that lantern more than I trust God, Mary said. God's terrible at navigation. Then we take the hymn, Ducasse decided. Signal the line, follow the light. The flagman blinked, then snapped his silk. A ripple ran down our fleet sails trimmed, helms bumped, curses revised. We slid toward the uncharted seam like thieves slipping through. Curtains in a rich house. The Spaniards saw the drift and committed. The lead frigate came abeam and loosed a proper broadside this time, a full, furious sentence. Iron ploughed water and wood. Brave Charlotte coughed splinters and swore like a tavern. Our decks skidded and jarred. Men went down, got up, kept going. The gun captain at our waist licked his thumb, touched a linstock, and gave back a paragraph in bright, emphatic clauses. In the half-second light, I saw the enemy's faces, angry young end, hated them for having mirrors of ours. Inside, Mary shouted, stabbing the dark with her finger. The felucca's lantern dipped twice, then hid, and that was the gate. The reef shouldered close. I could hear it talking in its dry crackle shells, cooking under moonlight. The sea gurgling as it learned new shapes. We slipped in. The current's hand changed from a shove to a grip. Tight, certain, guiding. Our keel missed something I didn't want to name by a hand's breadth. The Prosper behind us scraped and came off with a sound like teeth on slate. Men exhaled as if hauling a net together. The prizes groaned. The heaviest one kissed bottom and spat sand and kept moving because want makes ships saints. The lead frigate tried to match our daring and found the seam a size too small. She hit and reared and lurched, her rudder kicking like a furious mule. Her bow ground into the coral and stuck there, proud and wrong. Her guns still spoke, but now their grammar stuttered, and our men's laughter cut it off. Whoever you are, Ducasse whispered to the dark where the felucca had been. I'll buy you a devil's drink if we live. If, Mary said, because she liked honest words. behind the stuck frigate. The patash sprinted like a hound that thinks it can jump a hedge it shouldn't. It tried the seam, found an eddy slewed, and planted its nose into vengeance's quarter with the intimacy of a bad idea. Men leaped. Steel argued. For 5 heartbeats, the 2 holes were one curse. Then the Pachash recoiled with men missing and courage harmed. We came out of the teeth into a bowl of calmer water ringed with black dynamite low, Ks that would become knives at the wrong tide. The sky had the color of a bruise turning yellow. Dawn thinking it might like to exist. For a minute, just a minute, we had room to choose. Turn and rake, Diego said happily. Pistols in both hands, like a child discovering he had thumbs. Give them their own sermon. Not yet, Ducasse murmured. Get the prizes into the cat's cradle. Make the line long and ugly. Sails snapped. Hands flew. The fleet elongated, an eel uncoiling. Our slowest ships hugged the lee of a crescent of sand that barely had the decency to admit it was land. Our gnarlier sloops swung back out to tease the enemy like ferrets at a rat hole. The second frigate shot the seam clean. Her helmsman was a wit. Came at us with that particular Spanish stamina that makes a man respect his executioner. Her first volley tore the air above our heads and took a yard that had not offended anyone. Our answer stitched her shirts. Men fell on her deck and made the kind of shapes men make when they aren't men anymore. In the middle of it, the felucca slid up out of the glare with all the ceremony of a knife coming out of a boot. A hooded figure stood in her stern, lantern dead, hands alive. She hailed in a voice the sea tried to keep from us. Mary heard it anyway. What? Ducasse demanded. She says, drop your pride, Mary said. And for the first time this night's edge stole a hair from her voice. She says, cut loose the heavy chests. A growl rose on 3 decks at once. That silver had weight and music. It made the water love it. It made men drown for it and call that sensible. Drop your pride. The phrase found every captain's throat and held a knife to it. She's right, Diego said, and the words sounded like heresy from his mouth. The prizes are a rope around our neck. Ducasse stared past us to where the galleons. Shadow hunched on the far side of the quays, lazy as a god who knows he's owed. We carried them through the gate. We can't carry them through the graveyard, Mary said. Not before the 3rd frigate finds the seam and makes us wish for smaller appetites. We all looked back. The 3rd frigate had found the gate. Of course she had. Some captains have a smell for She slid in sideways with canvas fighting and curse words blown off her quarterdeck like leaves. She'd be on us in minutes. Cut, Mary said, and the word had a mercy I didn't expect. Live and come back hungry. Or die fat. Ducasse's jaw worked. This was the first choice I saw hurt him. He turned to me, which was cruel, but maybe he needed to see himself reflected in someone who bled easily. Write it, he said hoarsely. Write that we threw away a king's feast to buy a minute of time. 2 minutes, Mary said. If God still wants us as a joke, do it, Ducasse barked at the prize masters. Cut adrift. The howls were human. Knives flashed on painter lines. Axes bit hawsers. Chests that had arrived in our hands like destiny went back to the sea without ceremony. I watched a man kiss a bar of silver as if it were a child he'd only just remembered he loved. The splash was small, the thought enormous. The fleet leaped. The sea ahead looked free, but freedom is never more than alone. Our fleet scattered into its blue, sails ragged and hearts heavier than the holds they'd just emptied. Behind us, Cartagena was bleeding smoke into the sky. And between us and the city's teeth, a little fishing boat was being torn. Apart, one musket crack at a time. Mary gripped the rail until her knuckles blanched. Eyes locked on that lantern, bobbing, then vanishing in spray. "We go back," she whispered, but Ducasse had already turned his face forward. "No," he said. One word, clipped as steel. Diego spat into the sea. "Captain speaks true. Go back and we lose all." Mary's gaze burned hotter than cannon flame. "We already lost all." She jerked her chin toward the horizon. "What's left without honor?" "Shares," Diego said. "Rum, the wind." But his grin was hollow, and even he could not look back. I felt the pull of both choices tearing at me. To turn was madness. To leave was cruelty. And yet the ship chose for us, the sails fattened with wind, as if God himself leaned on them. The cut fell away astern, the cries swallowed by distance, the lantern extinguished. The Centenary did not slow. We sailed until noon before the fleet hove to in a crescent of safety, a ring of battered hulls hiding inside a coral cradle. The sea calmed, but no one felt calm. Men slumped where they fell, some bleeding, some laughing without sense, some clutching rosaries with hands too dirty to be holy. The prizes we'd kept wallowed low in the water, fat with coin, their crews already whispering about what they'd buy and how fast they'd drink it away. But on the quarterdeck, a different reckoning brewed. Ducasse called council. Captains gathered, Sharp and Maurice with salt still crusting their beards, Diego polishing pistols that stank of powder, and Mary, stiff and silent as a blade left in frost. I lingered close, ink-stained hands twitching. "The raid was won," Ducasse said flatly. "Cartagena bled. Her vaults are open, her pride broken. Spain will howl, but tonight we count shares, and tomorrow we vanish into the wind." "Not so clean," Sharp growled. "We left too many witnesses. The crown will not sleep. They'll hunt us from Jamaica to Cadiz. That's the game," Maurice said, smirking. "We signed for it. No profit without peril." Mary's voice cut through them like splintered glass. "We left them to die." The air shifted. Even the gulls circling above went quiet. "Not we," Diego said slowly. "The captain chose. We obeyed." Ducasse's jaw hardened. "I saved 6 ships, 200 lives. One boat could not outweigh the many." "One boat weighed more than silver," Mary snapped. She slammed her hand on the rail so hard the decks seemed to flinch. "That woman Isabel, she gave us the chain. She gave us the cut. She gave us the sea. And we abandoned her." "She knew the cost," Ducasse retorted. "Traitors always do. Their use ends when their luck does." Mary lunged, hand on her dagger. For a heartbeat I thought she would bury it in his throat and crown herself captain in blood. But her breath caught, her shoulders trembled, and she let the blade fall back into its sheath. Her voice broke low, trembling with fury. "If this is libertatia, then it's already ash." The word hit harder than any cannon. Libertatia, the myth republic, the dream whispered on beaches where crowns had no ears. It wasn't supposed to be gold that bound them, but the articles, the oath of equals. And now Mary accused them of breaking it. Ducasse answered not with anger, but with silence. Silence heavier than chains. The council broke in fragments, mutters sparking into curses, curses into shoves. Crews divided. Some clung to Ducas's pragmatism, others to Mary's defiance, and me. I watched the line between pirate and executioner blur like ink in rain. By dusk, the fleet was restless, shadows snapping at one another. Rum tasted bitter. The silver weed stolen weighed too much. Then, as the sun bled into the sea, a voice cried from the lookout, "Sail, ho!" Every head turned. Out on the horizon, black against blood-orange sky, rode a new silhouette. Not frigates, not patrol sloops. Something larger, a man-o'-war. 36 guns, tall and terrible, her sails fat with royal wrath, sharp cursed. "Spain's hounds are here." "No," Mary murmured, eyes narrowing. "Not Spain." The colors snapped in the evening wind, and every throat went dry. Not the cross of Spain, but the Union Jack of England. Our allies. Our betrayers. Both at once. What does it mean? I asked aloud. Mary answered, her face unreadable in the dying light. "It means the Empire smells opportunity. They'll not let us keep what we've taken." Ducas's teeth showed, a snarl or a grin. "Then let them try." The articles said every man had a voice. But that night, as the English guns rolled to bear and our fleet scattered like startled gulls, I realized voices break when thunder speaks, and thunder was coming. The English man-o'-war cut across the horizon like a blade meant for execution. Her name came into view first, carved in gilt letters across her stern, HMS Lion. She was no mere patrol ship. This was a floating fortress, her gun decks stacked like jaws, her hull broad as a cathedral. 36 mouths of iron ready to speak in thunder. The Union Jack snapped in the dusk wind. A flag that for some promised safety but for us was as dangerous as Spain's Crimson Cross. Pirates served crowns only when it suited them, and crowns tolerated pirates only when convenient. Tonight convenience had ended. On the Sainte Marie, men muttered nervously, their eyes darting between Ducas and Mary. Some were English by birth, and in that snapping flag they saw memories. Mothers on shore, hymns sung badly, promises of legitimacy. Others spat when they saw it, for it meant the very chain they had broken was now coming for them. Diego stroked the barrel of his pistol. "They won't parley. They'll hang us from the yardarms and call it justice." "Not all of us," muttered one of Sharp's crew. "The English among us," Mary cut him short. "You think your birth will save you. That lion eats its cubs, too." The man fell silent, but the thought hung in the air like the stench of tar. Ducas's eyes gleamed in the dying light. "They want our silver. Nothing else. We give them a fight so costly, they choke on it. Then the Caribbean knows. No empire holds us." He gave orders sharp as cutlass strikes. The fleet wheeled, forming a ragged crescent. Guns primed. Lines checked. Lanterns hooded again, as if shadows could make us invisible against a predator that had already tasted our scent. The Lion came on steady, deliberate, a hunter not in a hurry. She fired no warning shot. She didn't need to. Her presence was the warning. Mary stood at the rail, hair whipped loose by the wind. She leaned close to me. "Watch the men. This is where loyalties snap." She was right. On Prosper, an English crewman had already raised a kerchief, half signal, half surrender. He was knocked flat by a cutlass, but before it could climb higher. But the seed had been sown. Fear and memory are more dangerous than grapeshot. Then, as twilight deepened into night, the first broadside came. The lion's guns spat fire in a rolling thunder that split the sky. Water leapt in pillars, spray raining down like molten glass. One shot punched through brave Charlotte's flank, splitting her deck like a rotten plank. She screamed with her men as smoke boiled from her wounds. Our fleet answered. Cannons barked, pistols cracked, and Diego roared with laughter as he loosed both his pistols in defiance, the shots swallowed by the sea. Our balls slammed into the lion's hull, splinters flying, but she was oak and iron, built to eat such fury. The battle became a dance of light and shadow. Our smaller ships darted like wasps, stinging her flanks, dashing away before her great jaws could close. But each time she turned, another pirate sloop caught her wrath. The sea bloomed with debris, barrels, bodies. Mary shouted orders that cut through the chaos like church bells. Close in. Don't give her range. Board her, or we're corpses. It was madness boarding a man-o'-war with ships half her size. But madness is a pirate's mother tongue. Ducas's grin stretched feral. Do it. We surged forward. Grapnels hissed through the night, biting into the lion's rigging. Lines strained. Our decks slammed against her vast black hull with a crunch that shook teeth. Pirates howled as they leaped cutlasses in their fists. Pistols blazing. I saw Diego swing from a rope like a child at play, land in a spray of blood, and carve a red path across her gun deck. I saw Sharp's men surge into her forecastle, dragging Marines into the dark with knives in their teeth. And I saw Mary, eyes blazing, cut down a sergeant who blocked her path to the quarterdeck. The lion roared back. Marines fired point-blank volleys, the air choking with smoke and screams. Cutlasses rang against sabres, pistols flared, powder-scorched skin. Men slipped on blood-slick planks, grappling, biting, clawing like beasts. I followed Mary, heart-pounding, the silver pouch still thudding against my ribs. She fought like fury itself, her blade quick, her dagger quicker. We reached the quarterdeck steps when the ship groaned beneath us. The lion was trying to shake us off. Her helmsman swung her hard to starboard, her bulk rolling. Pirate ships still clung to her sides, but one Vengeance snapped her lines and capsized, her men vanishing into the sea with shrieks that cut the night. Mary stumbled, nearly falling, but my hand caught hers. For an instant, her eyes met mine. Not thanks never, that but something fiercer like a promise. We dragged ourselves upward. On the quarterdeck stood the lion's captain, sword in hand, coat torn but presence unshaken. He was a tall man with hair gone white, his face carved from salt and disdain. Dogs, he spat. Carrion, you mistake freedom for license. Tonight I teach you the difference. Mary raised her blade. Teach me, then. They clashed, steel sparking in the firelight. His strokes were measured, trained. Hers were wild, fueled by rage and memory. She ducked a cut meant to split her skull, drove her dagger into his thigh, and snarled as he staggered. But he struck back, the pummel cracking across her jaw. She fell, dazed, her dagger skittering away. His sword lifted for the final blow. Without thought, I raised my cutlass and blocked. The shock rattled me to the bone, but I held. His eyes flicked to me annoyance more than anger. Another rat, he pressed. My arms screamed, my knees buckled. Then Mary surged up, blood on her lips, and drove her blade through his chest. His eyes widened. He made no sound, only sagged, steel sliding from his grip. The lion's captain crumpled. Silence fell across the quarterdeck for one impossible moment. Then the Marines faltered. Their lion was dead. Ducas's roar split the night. She's ours. But victory was never so simple. Beneath our feet, the lion groaned again. Not in defeat, but in fury. Powder stores had been struck below. Flames licked through her hatches, hungry as wolves. Off, Mary shouted, dragging me by the arm. She blow. Pirates scrambled, leaping back to their ships, cutting lines, shoving free. The lion burned brighter, her own cannons cooking off in bursts that shredded friend and foe alike. Diego limped past, blood slick on his chest, laughing even as smoke wreathed him. Hell's got a feast tonight. He crowed. We cut loose, just as the lion's heart gave way. A blast ripped her belly, fireball blooming into the night sky, turning sea to daylight. Our ship heaved in the shockwave, masts shuddering, men thrown like dolls. When the smoke cleared, the man-o'-war was gone. Only fire on the waves remained, and bodies bobbing like driftwood. Our fleet limped away, what remained of it. But the air was not triumph. It was Mary stood at the bow, hair singed, eyes dark. We killed their lion, she said softly. But lions travel in prides. More will come. Ducas's grin flickered, almost vanished, then hardened. Let them come. We'll show them what carrion can do. But in the silence that followed, I felt the truth coil cold in my gut. We had not just made enemies of Spain. We had declared war on every empire that claimed the Caribbean, and wars are not won by ghosts in patched sails. When dawn finally rose, the Caribbean was a graveyard. Smoke drifted low across the water, ash clung to the sails, and the sea carried more dead than living. Our fleet, once 10 strong, limped on with half its number. Brave Charlotte was little more than a scorched carcass clinging to life. Prosper had lost her mizzen completely. Diego, laughing even through blood, had been pulled from the wreckage of another ship. His pistols gone, but his grin unbroken. And there was Mary, standing at the prow of the Sainte Marie. Her hair burnt at the edges, her eyes hollow and bright all at once. She had killed a lion, but her face carried no triumph. Only the weight of debts unpaid zebles foremost among them. The men whispered as they worked the pumps and patched holes. Some called the battle victory, others called it suicide with better branding. But all of them knew Spain would howl louder now, and England would not forget the sinking of her man-o'-war. By noon, Ducas summoned what remained of the captains to council. The deck was blackened, ropes charred, but a circle of men still formed, blades at their belts and rum burning their throats. The raid is done, Ducas began, his voice ragged but steady. Cartagena is scarred. Spain is humiliated. We hold enough silver to buy a year's freedom, maybe more. We scatter now. North to Jamaica, west to Tortuga, east to Martinique. Break the fleet. Hide the spoils. Live to drink. Sharp spat. Scatter, and they'll pick us off one by one. The crowns are watching. They'll come with chains and gallows. Morris grunted. What do you propose? We cannot face Spain and England both. Not with half our hulls broken. Mary's voice cut in, sharp as broken glass. Then we stop thinking like thieves. We stop running. We build. The men turned to her. She stood with arms crossed, blood still crusting her sleeve, the salt wind whipping at her face. We make the dream real, she said. Not whispers of liberty. Not stories traded in taverns. A republic, here and now. A place where no king owns us, no crown commands us, and no flag but our own flies. We take the silver and build walls, ships, laws. Not for profit. For freedom, the word hung in the smoke like a bell toll. Freedom, the council erupted. Some laughed, some cursed, some shouted until their voices broke. Diego barked a laugh that had no mockery in it. A republic of rogues. A court where every dog gets his bone. A fantasy, sharp snarled. You'd paint us as saints. We're devils. And devils die free, not penned in some new law. Mary's gaze didn't waver. Better a law we write ourselves than the rope another man ties. Ducasse watched her, his face unreadable. For a long moment, I thought he might sneer, dismiss her, call her foolish. Instead, he said softly, "And where would you raise this republic, Mary Kill?" Her answer came without pause. "Here, these islands, these reefs, the sea itself, Libertatia on the tide." The men murmured, some with hope, some with scorn, but none could deny the hunger in her words. The debate tore the fleet apart. That night, under broken stars, 2 ships slipped away, following Ducasse's counsel to scatter and vanish into the wide Caribbean. Others lingered, restless, torn between plunder and possibility. And then, just before dawn, a cry went up from the lookout. A sail, no many sails. On the horizon, a new fleet was rising with the sun. Spanish colors this time, 3 frigates and a galleon, vengeance in their wake. The crowns were already closing in. Panic surged. Men scrambled to ready guns, though powder was scarce and hulls groaned under the strain. Some talked of running, others of surrender. Mary's voice rose above them all. "We don't bend. We don't scatter. We stand, even if it's our end." Her eyes found mine. For a moment, the world fell away. "Write it," she said, "so they'll know. Even if we're ash tomorrow, let history choke on our defiance." The fleet turned, battered but unbroken, facing the dawn and the ships that carried their doom. Cannons primed, sails taut, hearts raw with rage and resolve. The sea stilled, as if holding its breath, and then the Spanish fleet slowed, not from caution, but because another shadow was rising behind them. More sails, but not Spanish. French this time, and beyond those, Dutch, and farther still, the faintest flash of English red. The crowns had come not just to punish, but to seize. Cartagena's blood had drawn every empire like sharks to Chum Dot. We were no longer raiders. We were the spark of a war greater than any buccaneer dream. Mary's face broke into a grim smile. "There," she whispered, "that's the truth." We changed the map, not with ink, with fire. The fleet around us braced for a storm larger than any one ship could weather. Ducasse lifted his blade. Diego roared with laughter. Men cursed, prayed, spat, and readied. And I, ink-stained and trembling, realized I was not writing a raid anymore. I was writing the first line of a new history. One where pirates did not just steal gold, they stole the right to rule. The sun climbed, bright and merciless, lighting the water until it looked like molten silver. Armadas clashed on the horizon, empires colliding. A storm of nations about to break, and in the midst of it, our battered fleet, sails patched, hulls scarred. Hearts still defiant, chose not to flee. We sailed into the fire, whether to be erased or remembered forever, do not know. No chronicle tells of that last stand. No Spanish log, no English report, no French letter, only silence, as though every crown agreed to bury it. Did we burn into legend, or did some survive, carrying silver and the dream of libertatia to another hidden shore? No one can say. But if the history you've been taught can erase a battle that might have changed the world, what else have they hidden from you? If you thought this tale was wild, wait until you hear the next untold pirate story, one where betrayal didn't just sink a ship, but an entire nation's dream. Subscribe, and I'll take you there.